This video will show you how to use Microsoft Edge to annotate a PDF. At this point, I should have already downloaded my article as a PDF or converted the web page into a PDF. If you haven't done that yet, review the other tutorials and come back to this one when you are ready. I have the PDF of my article saved on my desktop so that I can easily find it. I will begin by opening the PDF within Edge. Once it is open, I should be able to find the different annotation tools at the top of the page, including the highlight tool, the draw tool, and the add text tool. For this example, I am going to use the highlight and add text tools to highlight parts of the article and then add notes to explain why these parts are important. For this assignment, I should be paying attention to the author's main points, the evidence they present to support their points, and any arguments or evidence they present that complicates their points. Since I will likely be returning to these annotations later, when completing my source worksheets and writing my paper, I am also going to color code them. This color coding is not required for this assignment, but it may help you organize your information. Now I will begin reading and annotating the article. I have already read this article once, so I have a general sense of how the article is structured. For example, I know that the author begins by providing some background. Their first sentence is, "Cell phones are everywhere, including until recently in schools." In the next 4 paragraphs, they point to examples that support and further develop this statement and provide links to those sources. However, this isn't their main point. This is background information the author presents to foreground that this issue matters. Some of this background information might be useful to me, but for now, I am focused on finding the author's main point. The author states their main point in the 7th paragraph when they say, "As a scholar of educational leadership, I believe that school is about more than just classes. It's where young people learn how to get along with others. When phones are put away, students actually start looking at each other and talking again." One clue that this is their main point is that they use the personal I and say, "I believe." Up until now, they've been summarizing what others believe. Now they are introducing their main position, which is that schools teach important social skills and that cell phones are disruptive to learning those skills. This is one of the things that I'm looking for. So I am going to highlight it in yellow and put a note in the margin that says thesis. Now, as I read through the rest of the article, I am going to look for evidence that supports or complicates this thesis. As I continue reading, I'm going to find the first set of evidence, which is something that happened in Ohio. The author explains that schools in Ohio recently instituted cell phone bans. The author interviewed 13 principals about the experience and then broke down those interviews into statistics. Here, they present those findings, which suggest that partial phone bans increased students' social interactions and reduced peer conflicts. I am going to highlight this section in a new color, green, and put a note in the margin that says, "Evidence. Author interviews with principals." The next evidence that the author presents is a survey and interviews they conducted with students. They explained that the survey had mixed results, with a lot of the students saying that they felt anxious about family emergencies and that they believed they should be learning self-control rather than having phones taken away from them. This is complicating evidence, so I am going to highlight it in another new color, blue, and put a note that says complicating evidence, author surveys of students. When I get to the end of the article, I see that the author is making policy suggestions, including possible ways to respond to these concerns. To me, this also seems like an important part of their argument, so I am going to highlight them in yellow, the same color as the thesis, and put a note in the margin that says, possible solutions to student concerns. Finally, I am going to reread the article again to make sure there's nothing important I missed. As I do this, I notice that the author mentions and links to two other sources in the sixth paragraph that also supports their thesis. Based on the author's summary, the first article suggests that looking at phones can make it harder for children and teens to get social skills, and the second source suggests that phones make it harder for children and teens to develop and maintain relationships. I missed these the first time around because I hadn't figured out their thesis yet, but now that I know it, I see that these sources support it. Since the author links to them, I'm going to take an extra step and figure out what these sources are. I'm going to need to go back to the original article, so I open the web page in a different tab and open those links in new tabs. The first link takes me to the page for a book titled The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. The second link takes me to a page that summarizes the American Psychological Association's health advisory on social media and allows readers to download it and read it for themselves. Now that I know the sources the author is referring to, I'm going to go back to my PDF and make another note. I'm going to highlight the paragraph where they mention them in green, the same color I used for my other supporting evidence, and then write supporting evidence, book by Haidt, and APA Health Advisory. I also want to point out that by following these links, I now have two more sources that I can use in my own project if I want. So now that I've annotated this source, I've identified all of the information I need to do my source worksheet. When I go to fill out the worksheet, I don't need to reread the article. I just need to look at the sections I've highlighted in my notes.